The sheep are on fire. The sheep are on fire. The sheep are on fire. Welcome, Croeso, which is Welsh. Welcome to Tafad Tan. And this week on Tafad Tan, we have myself, Ninja, and we have Johann Sebastian Flap Sandwich.
As opposed to bark.
Yeah.
Does he bark?
Does he bark?
He barks.
Yeah. He's got a bit of bark in him. And my guest, our guest today on Tafad Tan is Alyson Jane Miller Smith. Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome back.
We're on Tafad Tan. So if you just joined us, you will notice that today is, in Cardiff, it's a picturesque day. We are here in the castle with Alyson Jane Miller Smith and Johann Sebastian Flap Sandwich. And if you've allowed yourself to join us, you will also notice that we are in the shed in Tafad Tan. So how has your morning been, Jane?
Good so far.
Good.
Morning. I walked from home across the park. Butte Park is looking stunning because all the autumn colours in the trees are out, aren't they?
It is beautiful.
And lots of happy dogs wandering around.
You like those Dalmatians that we see?
I like just about every dog. I used to have a German Shepherd.
And what was his name?
Boo.
Boo. Boo, yeah.
A bit like, Boo Radley. And he was the sweetest boy you could ever hope to meet.
So Alyson Jane. Shall I call you Jane?
Jane.
Jane.
My friends call me Jane.
Okay then.
The police and the authorities tend to call me Alyson.
They don't. And where are you from, Jane?
Originally, well, I was born in Bradford in Yorkshire. And my mother was from Yorkshire.
From Yorkshire.
Half
Bago.
and half Irish.
And half Irish as well.
And then I was brought up in Rugby in Warwickshire, Shakespeare country.
And what was that like?
Rugby.
Yeah.
The locals, to the natives, it's otherwise known as Drugby because it's in the middle where it matters.
Drugby.
Yeah.
In the middle where
it matters.
It matters.
M1, M6, you name it.
M1, M6.
And all the motorways converge. And it's very town and gown because you've got Rugby School, which is an elite public school, yeah? And then you got the town. And at that time, never the twain would meet, or very, very rarely.
And then Brighton, is it Brighton?
Brighton.
No, what is it? Broughton, Yorkshire.
No, Bradford.
Bradford. Sorry.
And then
Bradford.
I went back to Yorkshire. I was at university in Leeds.
In Leeds?
Yeah.
What was that like? What's Leeds University?
Fantastic.
And what were you studying?
English. Boring.
English?
No, I only did it because, I was in Italy and I had a place back and I ended up coming back. And if I'd thought about it in advance, like the way people do now, I'd probably have done something like anthropology or philosophy but I did English because it was easy option.
Easy option.
But I loved it. I had a really good time. I had some amazing friends. And I was actually there during the Yorkshire Ripper years.
Sutcliffe?
Yeah.
Whoa.
I was, I worked
Where were you at the time?
I worked on the Leeds Student newspaper for the 3 years I was there, which was the biggest newspapers, students' newspaper in the whole of England, certainly. And we distributed not just to the university, it went to all the other colleges as well. So I think we had, at the end, seem to remember we had a distribution of about 10,000. And I was arts editor for the last 2 years, but the final year was the year when the Ripper, he actually started attacking students.
What was the atmosphere like around that period of time?
Unbelievable.
Jane?
Unbelievable. It was a city held in fear by one individual. And of course, the police...
No one knew his name at that time, didn't know him as a person.
And what really threw things off was the guy with the Geordie accent who sent the tape in, and he made it personal between him and the guy who was leading the inquiry. So the police decided they were looking for a Geordie. Well, Peter Sutcliffe actually lived 1.5 miles from my aunt's home.
Oh my gosh. Just
outside Bradford, between my aunt lived in Pudsey, and she died about 3 years ago. And he was from Stanley. He lived 1.5 miles from my aunt's home.
But he was very deceptive because he didn't sound, when they did catch him, like he was a married man. He had a family, and
he was married to Sonia. And as my auntie said, Sonia knew he didn't have a family.
He didn't.
No. He and Sonia lived alone, and she kept that house after he went to prison. She kept that house, and although she divorced and remarried, there was a room in that house that she kept as a shrine to him.
So she knew then?
I think so.
You think so?
I think so. And the police officer who actually raised his concerns on a number of occasions about Peter Sutcliffe, he thought it was him. And he raised it. And he was persecuted.
For raising him?
Yeah, I heard on Radio 4 a while ago, the reunion.
The reunion.
Where they bring together people who were involved in, huge events. It could be the sinking of, something, or it could have been, but on this one, it was people who were involved in the Yorkshire Ripper case. And one of them was a female journalist who described how she was, she wasn't even recognised when she was in the room. And the other one was this policeman. He had been a local copper. And
Bobby.
And he raised his concerns about Peter Sutcliffe. And they had him in, and they interviewed him, but they let him go because the guy leading the investigation was convinced that it was a Geordie.
He was a Geordie.
Who they eventually did catch, this guy who'd sent in a tape saying, "I'm Jack the Ripper."
Yeah, because the tape, I remember that was
right, yeah,
on the news.
And he veered the investigation to look for a Geordie. But this guy knew Leeds and he knew Bradford because he killed in Bradford, he killed in Leeds.
And he was a Yorkie truck driver.
By the name of Peter Sutcliffe. Yeah.
Is it those, what the Yorkies, to carry big bars of chocolate and...
I don't think he was driving Yorkies. No, I think he was a truck driver. He was a truck driver.
And...
he travelled all over England, I think.
All over the UK.
And I think they subsequently said they thought there were a lot more victims out there outside of the Yorkshire area. But when he got going in Yorkshire, I remember in the first murder, I can't remember if it's the first or second year that I was, so this would have been 76, 77.
77.
The one in Leeds, there were 2 girls on my course who lived on the same street as where this Leeds prostitute had been murdered. And they said they were on the safest street in Leeds because they had, from that time on, there were 2 unmarked police cars constantly on their street. So they were safe as houses. And I saw him once. I'm not the only one. There must have been 50, 60 other people who saw him. He was trying to grab a student up in Headingley. Swear, it must have been him.
You see, yeah.
He got the timing wrong. It was a late November evening. Well, the shops were still open, but it was like 5-ish. And up in Headingley, big student area. And there was a row of shops near where Sweaty Betty's, the famous fish and chip shop, is. And a lot of the students, we go to the pubs up in Headingley. Yes.
Sweaty Betty's.
Sweaty Betty's famous. It's always mentioned on when they're doing the cricket. They go down to get their fish and chips from Sweaty Betty's store. Anyway, row shops, and then there was a lane up which there was an all-girls hall of residence. And behind the shops, there was a multi-storey car park. And so there were lots of people on the pavement, but the only lights was basically from the shop windows, the cars passing by on a main road. And this lane just comes straight onto the main road. And I think he got his timing wrong because there were loads of people about. And all of a sudden, there was this girl there. She got long blonde, I picture it. She got long blonde hair.
Long blonde hair.
She'd have been probably a first year student, 18.
18.
And she was there on the edge of the pavement being dragged backwards by a guy who got his arm around her neck.
Randy's.
And was dragging her backwards. And she
pulling her coconut back.
She was able to scream. And of course, everybody goes like that. And he disappeared. I'm
sure that was the,
Yeah, that was him.
Because there was a lot of, what was it? Photo fit pictures where they do the forensic
and
drawing.
They were right.
Yeah.
That's photographs.
Because he had a beard.
Had a beard and a moustache. He was dark-haired, dark-eyed, bearded moustache. You know.
So people were frightened, terrified. The women were terrified to go out. Was that terror in the uni as well?
The end of the third year, it started to get there, and then I left, but I visited because I had a lot of friends who were still up in Leeds, living up in Leeds. And I remember going back several times the following year. So that would have been the winter of probably 79. Yeah, it's winter of 79 into 1980. And the taxi drivers, because at one point they said, oh, it's got to be a taxi driver.
Yeah.
And
someone who knows the streets.
Yeah, who knows the city, knows the streets, who can pick up single women easily, you know.
Yeah.
And the taxi drivers, bless them, they were so good. I remember on one occasion being picked up at getting into Leeds Central, getting off the train, and a taxi driver was saying, I won't take one woman by themselves. I'll take three of you. Where are you? You know, we were three single women. Where are you going? And I think I was number one drop-off or number two drop-off. But, you know, he was calling in and also saying, and he was absolutely brilliant. I was going to visit some friends, again, up in Headingley. And he stopped right as close as he could get to the door. And he said, love, I will not drive off until I've seen you go through that front door and it's closed behind you. But nobody was walking. Woodhouse Moor, near the university, that's between university and Headingley, which is where a lot of students live, you wouldn't see anybody walking across the moor. And the guys were terrified in case they were suspected.
Of being...
So a bloke walking by himself also felt frightened because what are you doing wandering around walking by yourself, particularly if you've got dark hair and, you know. Yes. So the city was held in total fear by one man. That's what struck me. One person can do that to an entire city.
Yeah.
Well, like one president can do it to an entire country.
So when he was caught now, and everyone's seen, it's
a local guy.
It's a local guy
with a Yorkshire accent, Leeds Bradford accent. Yeah.
Was there? Did the atmosphere change then?
I can't remember, but I'm sure it did because go back to Leeds afterwards, and everything's different. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was a really, it was a really strange period to be living through. And initially, and this is not in any way to say anybody was making light of it or diminishing it. But originally, because it was prostitutes he was killing, or that's what people were aware of, the student population and people, young women, thought, well, he's going for prostitutes. He's targeting prostitutes because that's, how he finds because they're for sale sort of thing. I'm not. I'm going about my everyday business. I'm all right. And I think the first student he killed was actually over in Bradford. Wasn't in Leeds. I think it was in Bradford. If I
So
recall
didn't
right.
someone survive his attack, or is that some?
Several people
with a
survived.
hammer. It was a hammer.
Yeah,
she was.
She gave the photo fit details.
She was struck in the back of the head
that's
with
right.
the hammer.
Yeah.
She went to the ground. He was trying. Hit her again. She rolled away, and for some reason or something must have disturbed him.
He ran off.
Yeah, he ran up, and she
survived.
She survived
and
it.
she gave a very good description of him, and she also said he got a Yorkshire accent.
Yeah, because she said she was so she'll never forget it.
Yeah.
She's so lucky.
She's still living with the scars of it, isn't she? Because she got head injuries from that. Yeah. And the children of the people who died, I mean, again, they lost their mother. Well, when they were, 5, 6. And what a way to lose your mum.
Well, when he was in prison, one of the inmates
stuck him in the eye.
Yeah. Got the toothbrush, sharpened it on the wall.
Yeah.
And a split second, I don't know whether the guard wasn't around or whatever, or turned a blind eye.
Oh, look the other way.
Yeah. They stood up, grabbed him, pinned him on the ground,
and had his eye
and stabbed him clean in the eye. So he was blind in, is it the right eye? Yeah.
I can't remember.
Yeah, his left eye.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So that was a.
Yeah, and what I remember, because on that last, because I was arts editor, but all of us who worked on the newspaper, we were all involved in, sort of, this was the focus of it, everybody's attention, so all of us were doing stuff with, we might be phoning councillors or trying to speak to people or putting in, giving guidelines in the newspaper or writing articles about, all sorts of things. But, we were all, obviously, this was everybody's obsession, wasn't it?
So this is at Leeds University doing English.
Yeah. And upstairs, while we were putting the bloody newspaper to bed, we got the Gang of Four practicing. Remember the Gang of Four? And I knew Hugo, the drummer. I knew his dad.
Yeah.
As well, through my mother's business. And Tuesday night, I think, was our night for putting the newspaper to bed. And we would be up all night working on it, right? And at 11 o'clock at night, here they come, Gang of Four. Up the stairs. We were on the first floor. They went up onto the second floor. We'd listened to them practicing. After about 2 hours, somebody go and stand at the bottom of the staircase and, when you lock up there, just shut the fuck up. Hugo was doing English and drama. He did the best. He was in a production. I remember going into a production of Cabaret because I was arts editor, so I got to cover all the best things. Oh, went to the premiere of Star Wars. That was held in Leeds, and I went to the premiere.
Oh my gosh, what was that like?
Oh well, we couldn't. We didn't. Star Wars. Well, it wasn't. It was just a film, wasn't it? Why they were holding the premiere in Leeds is beyond me. But we had about 10 tickets to, for the student newspaper. So me and all my mates went along. And George Lucas was there and thanking everybody on the way out. Yeah, it was fantastic. I had a lovely night. But, of course, it wasn't famous. It was a really good film. And for some reason, they did the premiere in Leeds. Bizarre, but perhaps it was cheap.
Yeah, and the special effects, some of the models and stuff that was made in that was made by a guy from Wales.
Oh, I don't
Actually,
know.
a Welshman, he made them. And he still hasn't been, last time, paid for.
Oh,
his work is fine.
There was, actually, that just reminds me, because there used to be, and it probably is still there is a Dalek on Cowbridge Road East in a framing shop. And it's full size, and you can put a person in there. And in fact, it's been used for charity walks and races.
Oh my gosh.
And the guy who made that, he was never paid by the BBC for that. They asked him to make it. He brought it down from wherever. Fantastic. And I think they wanted to borrow it, but they didn't want to pay for it.
Yeah, this is the thing, you see. Yeah,
cheapskates. Bloody cheapskates.
Yeah, so Leeds. Yeah. So when did you come down to Cardiff? I
came down about 36 years ago, I think.
Yeah. And what were you doing at the time?
Well, I'd been working, we had a family business, and it's retail fashion. And I ran that business. My parents were in sort of semi-retirement, and then we got to the second depression of the 80s. Yeah. Late 80s it would be, wouldn't it? Yeah.
But the crash.
20. We went through a couple of depressions. So where are we? Like 2020 minus 30s, 2000 is 1990. So mid 80s, yeah. And I'd had enough. So I said, they were basically, my parents were retired. I was running the veggie business. I'd had enough. I want to change. I want to do something different. So we sold the business on, and I retrained. I am one of 12 people in the country, as far as I know. I'm the only woman who ever did this course. Database management systems.
Database management systems.
Yeah. I did a 6 months intensive course.
Oh my gosh.
Database management systems, East Warwickshire College of Further Education. Just happened to be held in Rugby, because Rugby is a centre of engineering excellence. You see,
oh my gosh.
From the Second World War. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And what was that like?
Well, there were 11 guys and me, and they were very naughty boys.
Do you have a cigarette, by the way?
Yeah, in fact, I'm on a rollie.
Yeah. A rollie, yeah.
I've got tobacco. I've got tobacco somewhere. I've got tobacco. Yeah. Oh, it was fun. It was a good course. Apparently, according to the one, because it was graduate entry, that was how they made us do the graduate entry tests to select.
And what do you have to do on that?
Well, you have to do a sort of comprehension, like it's language understanding and etc. And then there's a maths test, and then there's one in lateral thinking, abstract thinking. And apparently I came top of the board in abstract thinking, which is how I got on the course, because my maths was not too good.
Yeah, my maths, I thought could have been.
It could have been better. I mean, I like maths, and I was good at maths, and I had a lousy teacher, so I completely lost interest.
Same here with my teacher too. Yeah.
But the older I get, the more interested I get in things like maths and science. Strange, isn't it?
And
anyway, according to the guy on the course, he'd just done his first degree in computer science. According to him, and he'd just done his first degree, we covered the entire computer science 3 years degree syllabus in the first 3 months.
So that's, what is it, Python and Java and
we
Linux.
were working on a Linux system.
Linux,
yeah, database management,
yeah.
I'm doing programming. Yeah.
Programming, yeah.
And one of our tutors, he went on to, I think he got a job he left a little bit early. We had 2 main tutors. They were brilliant. And one of the tutors, he got a research job. I think it was either at Jaguar or something else, going to it. And he couldn't work out where my programs would work when his programs didn't. And he was saying, you've put exactly the same thing as I have, so how come yours works and mine doesn't? And I couldn't explain it to him, but he put it in the wrong order. It should have worked.
Yeah.
Theoretically, it should have worked.
Yep.
But for some reason,
it didn't.
It didn't. And he was going, but why is yours working and mine's not? And I was trying to say, well, because I put that line above your line, but you put it the other way around. And the computer doesn't like that. But it was a temperamental computer, it has to be said. Because
a lot of the code crackers as well, the code crackers in the war, were actually women. It was.
I know. I've just finished reading the story of Bletchley Park.
Because they found out where Hitler kept his socks.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they were the listeners.
Code crackers.
And the women at the listening stations, because it's been the guy who wrote the story of Bletchley Park, which I've only just finished reading. A few months ago, I actually read another book of his, which was about the listening stations.
Yeah.
All around the coastlines, mainly, because they were listening into German broadcasts from the U-boats, from ships, from everything. Those were the listening stations, and that the women were mainly the listeners.
Yeah.
And and the ones in Bletchley Park, they get to recognise the way in which somebody, the rhythm that they were doing the codes in.
Oh, see.
The Morse code. that everybody would have their own rhythm. And they get to know, oh, that's so-and-so, and I know that's so-and-so because we managed to work it out. He's on this U-boat or he's on that ship. So they could help track where the U-boats were and where warships were because they recognised the semaphore operators.
Oh my gosh. And the actual, what is it? Morse code unit was invented by a Welshman from Swansea.
Yeah, and where did
where
did they do the first broadcast from? Just along the bay, didn't they? Just past Barry Island.
Barbados, you see.
Barbados, just beyond there, near Lavenant
the fish and chip bar
is where the first broadcast took place across the water.
For Morse code.
I think it was Morse code.
Yeah.
It's a small world, isn't it?
The Tapa. Yeah. And also, what gave the supremacy and the winning of the Second World War was actually they were using the Welsh language, and the Germans did not understand the Welsh language. No. That threw them off.
I bet it did.
Wales don't get credit for these things. So credit is due where credit is due.
And they also used, now this I got read from somewhere else. This was the Americans, I think. And they used one of the first people, I can't remember whether it was Navajo or which tribe it was. They'd get them using their Native American Indian language in codes. On the American
side of it. So we've got another tribe, the American Indian, another tribe of, we say, Israel, or tribe of God, the American Indian. And the other tribe, which no one doesn't talk about, which Flap Sandwich knows about, is actually the Welsh. Because Welsh actually means foreigner.
And it's one of the romances. It's a vague, it's a strange part of, it comes underneath the Romance languages. Dwi'n buta, dwi'n hoffi buta, barasels. Learning Welsh.
Is bread. Bread.
Do I like bread and sausages?
Yeah. Buta.
Buta. No, bara.
Bara is bread. Buta is eat. Yeah. Buta.
Hoffi, to like. Dwi hoffi. Dwi'n hoffi. Buta. Bara selsig. I like eating bread and sausages. If I'd known Welsh was so easy to learn, having learned, because I was saying that because I speak Italian and French.
So why was the big thing of when Wales was taken over to give them the Welsh, not to stop them and speaking the language?
Well, I assume it's like every other, you don't want people talking in a language that you don't understand, do you? Irrespective of where you are. If you are the dominant nation, you don't want people talking in front of you and you don't understand what they're saying. It's like the Spanish with the Catalans, isn't it? Yeah. Anywhere you go where there's a minority people who don't actually want to be under the control of the invading forces, which whatever they may be, you speak a foreign language and you're dangerous. Across Europe, you've got, in Spain, you've got the Basque people, and Basque and Welsh are related, aren't they?
Yeah.
Breton and Welsh are related. So anywhere, I mean, even down to I'm thinking about Barcelona, Catalan, which is different from Spanish.
Barcelona.
And Barcelona and Catalan, they want their independence because Barcelona is the powerhouse. That is where the wealth is made in Spain. But again, it all goes to Madrid, doesn't it? It's like money that is made in one area of the UK is actually siphoned off for London's purposes.
So do you have to is it always downgrade the people where that country is where the wealth is?
Marginalise them.
Yeah.
And make them poor.
And put them through the shredder.
Yeah.
Shred them.
Marginalise them, make them poor, work the bastards to death. What better way is there? What better way is there of getting rid of a race
and men
and maximising your profits? To use that sort of economic terminology,
to maximise the profits.
What did the Nazis do? They put people, if they were fit, they worked them to death in the factories, didn't they?
Yeah.
They worked them till they died. What did the Japanese do with the British and Allied prisoners of war? They got them
bamboo
building
sticks in
a
their toes.
railroad
And put bamboo sticks in their toes.
and buried them in holes and decapitated them.
Yeah.
And anywhere where there is. And these are the people who are likely to be bolshy as well. You do it to the ones that are going to be bolshy because the rest of them are going to obey you. The rest of the population will obey because they think it's safer to live that way.
See.
You think about the Polish ghettos. And there was an uprising, wasn't there, in that Polish ghetto? And the Nazis went in and they took them out. And they sent them to Auschwitz. They sent them to the camps and they destroyed the ghettos.
Had them working. But when you've got they got them working, they're not feeding them.
No, absolutely.
So what's that? How are you supposed to work without,
Well, that's it. You work them to death
eggs.
because there's plenty more where that lot came from.
Oh, see.
I mean, don't forget that it wasn't just the Jews. It was the gypsies. They wanted to
the Romanian gypsies.
All Romanists. It was anybody with mental health problems.
So, yeah.
They were in the chambers, or they were experimented on.
Yeah, like those two twins. That's where the dentistry came from.
But they took them out of the mental health institutions, and they were there to be experimented on.
Pulling the teeth out without an anaesthetic.
Or doing
twins.
operations to them, or lobotomizing them, or whatever you want. And can you believe this? This was prior to the Second World War, I'm sure it was. One of the joint winners one year for the Nobel Prize for Medicine was an American doctor who invented the technique of lobotomy. And it was used on one of the sisters of the Kennedys, JFK and Bobby.
Yeah.
One of their sisters who during the Second World War, Joseph, Nasty Daddy, he was the Joseph Kennedy, the crook. He made his money from bootlegging in the States, became ambassador to the United Kingdom during the Second World War.
Bootlegging is alcohol, yeah?
Alcohol,
making
tobacco,
alcohol and all that, yeah.
Drugs, no doubt. It was primarily alcohol, wasn't it? During
coming into Britain.
Well, no, he did it in the States. That's where he made his money. And then, of course, he got rich and powerful, and he got the job of ambassador, United States ambassador to the United Kingdom during the Second World War.
Oh my gosh.
And he was in London with his wife and some of his family. JFK's older brother was serving. JFK was serving. I think Bobby was too young to serve, but there were a couple of sisters in the mix as well, because it was a big Irish Catholic family. And the brightest sister, and she was a socialite and highly intelligent, but from what I've read and what I've heard about her, she also had bipolar affective disorder, like myself.
Wasn't Kennedy shagging Diana Ross?
Which one? I think wasn't that the younger? which Kennedy?
Was he dealing with Marilyn Monroe as well?
That was JF. That was John and Bobby, wasn't it? Weren't they both boyfriends of Marilyn?
Yeah.
This is the father, Joseph, father of the family. He had one of his daughters lobotomized.
Oh my gosh.
When they got her back to the States, she was lobotomized, never to be seen again because she had to be kept in an institution.
My gosh.
They didn't like her being out and about, lively, socialite. She was a woman. It's all right for the guys to do it, but not so good for a daughter. Not for a daughter. No.
What about Wales? What's it like here?
Good in parts, like a curate said. No, it's
what's
changed.
Your experience
Come on, it's changed. When I first came down, right, I've always lived in Cardiff, always. So 35 odd years in Cardiff. But I was working for the first good 10, 12 years in Gwent. Gwent, yeah. And so I was working on a project which was to do with education and training. That was where the database management skills came in. You see, that's why I came down. I got a job running a database system, setting it up, actually setting one up and running it. Then I became the project manager of the overall project, which was training, development, etc. And then we added on counselling. We actually, when they were closing the mines, I think it was Oakdale mine we went up to one of the mines. We took our computers up there, but we also used a lot of other sources. So miners who were being made redundant, they'd be sent to, they could come along to us and ask us about, so if they were interested in being, say, an HGV driver, we would find the courses, tell them how they could, what they would need, what qualifications, whether they could get free training. etc. We did everything. I mean, I remember one young lad from up the valleys. This was a really interesting one because we would research these because we were all interested as well. We got one young lad from up the valleys, and he phoned up or contacted us and said he wanted to become a butler. So we actually tracked down how he had to go to college in London because there's a special college in London where they will train you to become a butler. So we found him the information. So he actually did go to train to be a butler. I remember that because we were absolutely fascinated because we were going, now, how the hell do you become a butler? Now, that's really interesting. How do we find out about that? So we found out how to become a butler. So we'd tell people, we'd find obscure things. In fact, the obscure the better, because those are the ones we really enjoyed. And we did things like reskilling for women,
So what was that?
Like women returners, women returners. It was called Training Access Points, TAP, but we were database went TAP. We did a women's show up the valleys, head of the valleys.
And what was that like with the work going from the valleys and this, that, the other, and stuff? Was that must have been very fulfilling when you seen that you were helping other women get back into it?
I love the valleys. Where to from is it now?
Mm-hmm.
Where to from is it now?
Where to from is it now?
Took me 3 years to get a handle on that one. I had a secretary. She was marvellous. She was from Pontypool. She taught me Wenglish because she'd come out with these expressions and I'd be going, what the hell does that mean? Wenglish. Oh, and you must have heard this one. Do you remember? It's 30 years ago, I'm sure it was. The theme song to the Robin Hood, Everything I Do it for You.
Yeah, Brian Adams.
Brian Adams.
Yeah.
And it was in the hit parade, wasn't it? For like 6 God, it just never left the top of the hit parade. No, everybody was bloody sick to death of it, weren't they, one summer? And this is a true story. And I actually, I think it was this secretary, she was actually a guest at this bloody wedding up the valleys. Right. Young couple getting married. So they go and see the local vicar or whatever. And they're arranging it. And he said, well, you want music? And they said, oh yeah, we want music. And they said, well, I've got an organist, right? So we'll organise, you go have a chat with him, tell him what music you want. And so they met the organist, told him what, and they went on the way coming down from having been wed from the altar. They wanted the theme tune from Robin Hood. Did this guy know what it was? And he goes, yeah. And he's an old boy, but yeah, I know the theme tune from Robin Hood. But of course, when they came to walk down the aisle, it was the theme tune from, do you remember the old TV series, Robin Hood, right? And that's what he played. He turned around to walk down the aisle. They just exchanged vows and they get Robin Hood, riding through the gate. And you can imagine the entire congregation, everybody's just bloody creasing themselves. The organist didn't know the Brian Adams and he didn't know the film. He must have thought it's a bit of an odd choice, but that's what they want. That's what they're going to bloody well get. And I actually heard one of the DJs, I think it was on Radio 1, obviously he had contacts in the area because I heard him talking about it on Radio 1 a few days later on national radio. And then one of my members of staff went, "Yeah, I was at that wedding." And have you heard about the guy in Pontypool? This happened also this era. This was hysterical. Absolutely bloody hysterical. He must have been smoking something good, is all I can say. Because this policeman was called to this guy's house. Somewhere near Pontypool, I think it was. Yeah, it was. It was Pontypool area. There's obviously something in the water up there. And he phoned up and they said, "I've seen a UFO. I've seen there's a ship and there's a mothership."
Unidentified flying
object. Yeah.
Object.
Yeah. It's in the sky. It's really bright lights coming from this.
Above his coconut. Yeah.
I'm looking down the garden and there's this great big round bright light shining in the sky. So the local Bobby goes, he's got, "Come on, I'll show you now." Took him into the back, points at the night sky. It was a full moon. Now, I know it's wet up the valleys, and I'm surely to God a bloke had seen a full moon before now. As I said, whatever he was smoking was obviously good. He thought it was an unidentified flying object.
I was like a ball for a nice sin one, and I ran all the way around the thing. And then I seen another three. And I went, "My gosh, they're UFO." Next day, I found out that there were Chinese lanterns in it. They're getting people are sending them these lanterns.
Well, the best thing of an evening, right, this time of year, is dog walking time up the fields. And I used to take my boy up there, and everybody, obviously, you put flashing collars on them, don't you? So that you can, you've got a clue where your dog is.
Yeah.
And you get multicoloured flashing collars, and you get plain flashing collars, but all the dogs have got something flashing on them, and everybody lets their dogs off the leads, and all you can see running is all these flashing lights. And I was up there one day with Boo, and I went, "Bloody hell, it looks like the aliens have landed. This is the mothership." Bloody beam me up. Beam me up, Scotty. So this is what it is, really, you see. Dogs are obviously the real master race.
Yeah, well, the dog brain is
Yeah. So they have come down here and what is dog backwards?
God.
There we go. So you see, we're really all under we should all be under the control of our little doggy friends, because they've obviously come above because they all wear flashing lights in the winter.
Romulus and Remus. Romulus and Remus.
I think you'll find they were wolves.
Mm.
I lived in Rome.
Lived in Rome. What was that like?
Oh, amazing. I
love Italian clothing, and I like Italian food.
I like Italy in general, actually.
Yeah.
No,
their cars.
I lived in
Ferrari,
Rome.
amazing.
I was there for 18 months when
Lamborghini.
I was 18. Went out after A-levels.
Oh my gosh, what was that like? Was that your first time?
I'd never been to Italy before. Well, I had. As a child, we went to Venice once on holiday, camping.
Oh my gosh.
No, I went out there without a word of Italian, but I went to be a babysitter.
Buongiorno.
Babysitter for an Italian family. And I had an amazing time because I met some really, really interesting people. I was in Piazza del Popolo, which is
Piazza del Popolo,
the People's Square. Piazza del Popolo.
The People's Square.
The night that Pier Paolo Pasolini was murdered in the woods in Ostia. We actually heard it before we hit the news. somebody came up to our table. I was with a whole group of people because I went out with loads of, we went out in big groups, all friends together, Italians mainly, and a few other foreigners. But, we were sitting, for some reason, we weren't normally in Piazza del Popolo, but that night, for some reason, we happened to be in Piazza del Popolo, and somebody came over and said, Pier Paolo Pasolini has just been murdered. And he was murdered by agents of the Vatican because he'd just finished making that film about Christ.
Was
and they really
that the one who was hanging under the bridge?
No, that was God's Bunker.
Oh God! Oh yeah.
That was afterwards. No, Pier Paolo Pasolini was one of the
with
top
his chest
Italian
cut open and
directors.
all. Yeah.
No, and I knew people both in who worked for Cinecittà, the
Cinecittà.
Italian cinema, Cinecittà. In fact, I worked as a translator of film proceeds part-time, and then I worked for an Italian film producer with no films to produce part-time. Had a wonderful time. All I used to do was make long-distance phone calls and read scripts. Oh, and we used to go through the casting books as well. Me and my employer, who was a producer with no films. His name was, what was his name? I can't remember now. Lovely man. His best friend was, not that I met them, his best friend was Sophia Loren's husband.
I love Sophia Loren.
Her husband was a film producer.
Yeah. Amazing.
Anyway, my boss, he was Italo-American. His mother owned and ran the newspaper stand in Times Square in New York.
We had trays with Sophia Loren's face on the wall.
Oh, lovely.
And around most of the Caribbean, and tables.
Okay.
For Sophia Loren's face shape and style, yeah? And we had trays hung up on the wall, like the Caribbean homes.
Personally, I thought Claudia Cardinale was more beautiful. She was in The Leopard. Remember the film The Leopard? Il Gatto Pardo in Italian. Most wonderful film. I think that was Visconti. Set in, the guy who wrote the book was, it was his family story basically, which he'd fictionalized a little bit. The Leopard, Il Gatto Pardo. And he was from Lampedusa, Giuseppe di Lampedusa. Lampedusa is an island just off Sicily. It's one of the islands around the bottom of the foot of Italy. Magical island. Nowadays, of course, all get washed up for bastards trying to escape from Libya and places like that. But there used to be places, really serious places to go. And he was the prince. He was one of the princes of Lampedusa. Yeah. And The Leopard, which was a wonderful, wonderful film with Burt Lancaster in it. And Claudia Cardinale when she was about 17. And
Claudia.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Cardinale. Claudia Cardinale.
Or Claudia Cardinale, as they'd call it here, but Claudia.
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 Cardinale.
Okay, we've got a couple of minutes left. Could I ask you, after you were working up the valleys, what did you do after that?
I did European funding for Gwent. I used to bring in at least £8 million a year for several years.
Was that for art or other things?
That was for education and training. And then they abolished the local authorities. I worked for what is now part of South Wales University. I did their European funding, got them a library, a learning resources centre. Call it a library, you don't get funded. Call it a learning resources centre, get £2.5 million.
And what about these days? What are you up to these days? How do you spend your time?
Well, actually, I'm on long-term sick. The last 10 years, I've been working as an peer outreach worker in adult mental health services.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
I was one of the first two ever employed by a local authority in Wales.
And it was Mental Health Day. Yeah, was it yesterday? I was supposed to
World
be in
Mental
Penarth.
I thought it was this week. World Mental Health Day.
Oh, is it this week?
I think it's this week. Not sure. It's this time. It's soon.
Because I was supposed to be in the sea at 6 a.m. with this group of ladies said support and running.
Oh, yeah, there's lots of those groups. I don't do cold water myself. You can have a heart attack doing things like that.
Well, I did a cold bath.
And in the meantime, of course, I've been beaten up by the police and arrested and taken to court and charged with harassment.
Oh my gosh.
Cardiff police.
So who did you harass?
Allegedly. Well, they harassed me. They harassed me. I mean, I've been found guilty, but I'm challenging it. I allegedly harassed. Well, I was found guilty, but no, I didn't have time to prepare my court case. In fact, I wasn't even allowed back into my flat, which I've owned for over 30 years, to collect any documentation to help my side of the story in court. I wasn't allowed back in favour of tenants who'd been renting the place for less than 2 years, one of whom, unfortunately, happened to be a police worker.
I see.
Neighbours from hell.
Absolutely, particularly when she starts going out with a CID officer who is meant to be living with his wife and family in Newport, but would rather be living above me with his little girlfriend in Cardiff.
Oh my gosh.
So you can imagine what I think of Cardiff, please.
So you said earlier that you also suffered from mental problems in your life. You mentioned
yeah, but I was diagnosed with bipolar 30 odd years ago. I mean, I've been working in mental health for 10 years, and I've done self-management training, and actually I am amazed that I've managed to survive the last year of complete hell, and mentally I have held up. Physically I ain't been too good. I've had COVID twice. I've got long COVID syndrome. The people living upstairs from me wouldn't even wipe a door handle.
Oh my gosh.
How very dare they? Just sticking to the mental side of things 1 second. We've had a lot of people on this show who were sort of in their 20s, 30s, who are suffering with mental illness and problems like this. Could you offer any advice on how to get along in life and just any how you've managed it?
Total epidemic due to lockdown. This has made people who have never suffered from mental health issues before suddenly discover that they are susceptible. And it's often the ones who would say, oh, you know, pull yourself together, get over it.
Yeah.
Why? Because their lives have been relatively easy supported. When you've got a routine, you've got a good background, you've got a good family structure, you've had a happy childhood, you know, you're supported, you're developed, nothing really bad has ever happened to you. And then suddenly you're stripped of all the structures that keep you sane. Like you can't see your mum and dad.
Yeah.
You can't go to work. You can't go out. You can't meet up with your mates. And you're suddenly isolated. This is where things begin to break down. No matter how resilient you think you are, you suddenly discover that you are vulnerable. Because the worst thing for anybody, and they know about this in the prison systems all across the world, like sleep deprivation is a torture. Isolation from other human beings is a torture. We are social animals. And I would say primarily, keep yourself connected.
Keep connected.
Keep yourself connected.
Stimulate the mind.
Find yourself some occupations. You can always go online. You can join online communities. And most important of all, if you are feeling vulnerable, talk. And men are the worst. Now, I'm suicide intervention trained, right? I've been assist trained. And I know that whereas the more we allegedly attempt to commit suicide, but often those attempts are actually a cry for help because they self-harm or they get found, they take an overdose, but somebody's going to come in and find them. 9 times out of 10, they're going to be saved. A man will go off and do something drastic, like take themselves down the wood with a rope and jump off a tree and hang themselves.
Yeah.
And then their friends do it because their best mate has just gone and bloody done it. So I've lost my best mate. He's gone. Might as well go and bloody join him. No, life is for living, and never say die, because I have been through the most horrendous periods of my life. I have been at the point of taking my own life. I mean, seriously. And if I was going to do it, I was going to do it for real. But for whatever reason, at the last minute, I decided, no, I'm not going to set my file for fire. It's going to be too painful. Or I can't do that because it's going to hurt too much. You know, and I've survived. And nowadays, I'd say to anybody, you never know what's going to happen around the corner. You never know. Tomorrow might be the best day of your life.
I had a friend called Andy. He set his settee on fire and was arrested for burning his own settee.
I'm not surprised. Did you go to prison for arson?
He did. He was sectioned because of it. It was up Canton.
Well, there's a friend of mine
above a shop.
There's a friend of mine under a section at the moment, and I'm going to go and get him out because he shouldn't be there.
But he wrote a brilliant book. It's called Tears of a Clown, and he also was suffering as well from a lot. Yeah, his mental health.
Well, I know somebody who was a child
And
was abused.
he burnt his settee.
I know somebody who was a child was abused by her father. When she got into her teenage years, that rage was still there, despite the fact that she committed suicide because he'd abused her as a child. So she set his bed, her dead father's bed, on fire when she was a teenager, as a sort of act of revenge on her dead father. And she ended up in. She ended up in Broadmoor or one of those places. Took her 25, 30 years to get out.
My gosh.
This is how they punish people. The innocent get punished.
The innocent are punished. Yeah, because as I said, you know, playing pool in Whitchurch,
you told
T Canal, and was in there, and then all of a sudden, I was just about to take a shot, and this girl about 5'2", black hair, short cut hair.
How old was she?
She was about 30.
And how many years ago was that?
It's about 16 years ago, 16, 17 years ago. Yeah, and she came over and pushed the table over and the balls went on the floor. And I says,
why are you doing that?
I said to her and then walked off. I says, what's
what
wrong?
do you want to do that for? Yeah,
and apparently she was from Whitchurch area for a well-to-do family, and because she had a baby without being married, they had a section.
You'd think this
and took the baby away from her.
You'd think we were in the Victorian era, because that's what they used to do there.
Took the baby away from her, and she can't come out because she's never been right since the baby took, and she keeps having these reminiscing.
Of course. But with the right sort of support and treatment, she could be living a fulfilled life.
And you look in her eyes, and they're just gone.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to go now, and thank you, Jane, for your presence on Tafad.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been great.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Diolch.
Diolch yn fawr.
Adios.